2024, the Major John Leroy Haynes Florida Veterans History Program was created to collect and preserve the stories and experiences of Florida's veterans and to recognize the state of Florida's military contribution throughout our nation's history. Through recorded interviews, the Florida Veterans History Program Oral History Collection acts as a living archive of first-hand accounts to capture the details of military service and the voices, memories, and reflections of the Floridians who served. The Major John Leroy Haynes Florida Veterans History Program is operated by the Department of State, Division of Arts and Culture's Florida Folklife Program. Together, we are proud to ensure that Florida's military history is preserved, honored, and shared. My name is Julian Duncan with the Florida Department of State, Division of Arts and Culture, Florida Folklife Program. Today is September 19th, 2025. It's 10:14 a.m., and I'm interviewing Dr. Andrew Del Gaudio in University of West Florida, Pensacola, Florida. Also present is Dominic Tartaglia. This interview is being conducted for the Major John Leroy Haynes Florida Veterans History Program. It will be submitted to the State Archives of Florida, as well as the Library of Congress Veterans History Project. Good morning, Dr. Del Gaudio.
Good morning.
How are you doing today?
Very good.
Good, I'm glad to hear that. So to begin this interview, could you tell me a little bit about your early life growing up, what you were like as a child, your family?
Yeah, so I was born 26 August 1975. My family is originally from the Bronx, New York. Both my mother and father were born there. My mother grew up in Mount Vernon. My father grew up in the Bronx. When I was born, we lived in New York, born in Mount Kisco, New York, and then lived in Brewster, New York, where my mother's father and mother lived, my grandparents. I would say as a youth, I was very involved in sports. I was involved in scouting. Always enjoyed physical sorts of activities, enjoyed physical work growing up as a young man. At the age of 14, I went to Valley Forge Military Academy in Wayne, Pennsylvania, where I graduated in 1993, my senior year. I joined the Marine Corps. Immediately thereafter, went to Parris Island, South Carolina. Had the opportunity to go to college. College is not something that I set out to do when I graduated high school. Neither my mother nor father were college graduates, so it was kind of a struggle initially for me to understand why I needed to go to college. And then eventually my mother talked me into it, and we always do what mom said, right? So we did that, and graduated from Villanova University in 1997. With a graduate or an undergraduate degree in history, and then commissioned in the Marine Corps that same year, May 15th of 1997. From there, I went to the basic school in Quantico, Virginia, did the 26-week course there, the basic course, and then commissioned, took my commission and became an infantry officer in the United States Marine Corps.
And I just want to follow up on a couple things you said there. So firstly, you're attending a military academy for your high school. You are involved in scouts, you're involved in sports, stuff like that. And one of the things that has stood out to me about, kind of some of our conversations is your focus on mentorship. And did you see kind of like as an early examples of that when you were a young person through sporting, through scouts, through those experiences?
Absolutely. I mean, I would say it would start at my family. My mother's mother, my great uncle, had, she had a brother, my uncle George. George had served in the United States Army during World War II. He had been an enlisted man through the rank of Sergeant First Class in the Army. And he had served in North Africa. He had served in Sicily and Italy, and they went to Normandy at D+19. So I'd grown up with a lot of the stories about George, and he's buried in Arlington now. But what was special and interesting about him was that he was actually a battlefield commission. He picked up a lieutenancy as a commissioned officer in the Battle of the Bulge in December of 1944. And he continued to fight through the Hurricane Forest where he was wounded. So we had a very strong tradition, for military service in my family. My grandfather, my dad's side, had served in the United States Navy. My father was a United States Marine. Wow, we got a lot of them too, right? I don't have any brothers and sisters. My cousins, very few of them served as military. But I would tell you that the family connection was probably the first thing that kind of guided me in that direction. And going to military school, I had a lot of very senior officers that were recently retired that were our instructors at military school, all the way from the ranks, colonels and generals and admirals on the Navy side down. Um, yeah, my gym teacher was a very influential individual in my development. Major, then Lieutenant Colonel Craig, and he was our wrestling coach amongst other things, but he was a Marine officer. And that was really Craig Evans, his name was. That was really the first opportunity that I had to learn what being a Marine officer was really all about.
Mm.
That was something that was a seed, I would say, that was planted early. I knew that I wanted to be a Marine. I just didn't understand what was going to be required to be a Marine officer.
Mm.
And then certainly going to recruit training in the early part of my enlisted time, that is really where that seed grew. Interestingly, here at the University of West Florida, I always have the opportunity to talk to students about mentorship. And one of the most insightful questions I think I've probably been asked is, what is a good, when you're seeking out a mentor as a young individual, what should that look like?
Hmm.
And I think really what it boils down to is somebody that's going to not only challenge your assertions about what you think something is, but also give you the guidance and direction that you're lacking, give you the idea about what that career path is going to be about, highlight some of the challenges that exist about that particular career path, and then ultimately kind of, show you the roadmap, if you will, for what it is that you're about to get yourself into. And, that I was very fortunate to have multiple people during the time that I went to military school at Valley Forge show me what that looked like. Um, Not only did I get the military side of it though, but I also had the opportunity to develop as a young man, understanding the value of character. We had a very specific character development program that retired Brigadier Army, or he was an Army Brigadier General by the name of Sinelli. Um, he was a World War II veteran, and he spent a lot of time with us just talking about what the elements of character were, the value of integrity, what work ethic truly meant in the grander sense of just being a better person, not necessarily in the context of being an officer or being a soldier or Marine or so forth. But General Sinelli, certainly, through his character development program, definitely instilled a lot in me that I carry through with this day.
And you said you knew you wanted to be a Marine. What drew you to the Marine Corps specifically?
I mean, that was a very, very easy discussion in my house. I mean, my father had been a Marine, served during the time of the Korean War, and I grew up around the Corps. So once a Marine, always a Marine. I mean, when you grow up with folks like that, it's a cult. I mean, we are, we're a military service, but at the end of the day, we are probably the only service, where the commandant is next to God. I mean, that's the reality of the matter. And once a Marine, always a Marine. I mean, that was just the group that I wanted to be with. I grew up, going back in my own development, thinking about like E.B. Sledge's book. I'm a big fan of what Eugene Sledge had to say in his work. Um, when I read, back and forth through, his works over the years, talking about the Battle of Peleliu or talking about what happened on Okinawa, the one thing that really jumped out at me, in parallel was the reason he joined the Marine Corps was the same reason I did, because it is the best. That's what we wanted to do, was to belong to something that, has very high standards, clearly, and was going to go forward and do the work that the nation expects. And that was really, I joined the Marines because I wanted to fight.
Right. How did your training, you mentioned both the Parris Island recruit training, your time enlisted, and then the 26-week basic school. How do you feel like that grew you?
Uh, Parris Island was all about, that was the test to make sure that you could make the Marine Corps. The Marine Corps, like I said, has very high standards. Our recruit training is designed to separate the wheat from the chaff. That's really what Parris Island or San Diego does. I think that really, I like to tell folks that my military school experience prepared me for life, whereas, you know, Parris Island obviously gave me the opportunity to earn the title Marine, and I've earned a lot of titles in my time, whether it be doctor or, lieutenant colonel or whatever. But I would tell you that the one title that really means the most to me is Marine, right? That's the identity for which I'm most proud. And when I went to the basic school in 1997 after commissioning, I could tell you that, I was very well prepared intellectually to go there. I was very physically fit to go there. I understood why I was going there. I understood what I would be doing there and what I was preparing myself for. I had very good mentorship in my staff platoon commander, Forrest Dane Dodd, Captain Dodd, and I was very fortunate to go through that course. It was a hard time for me. The first 3 weeks that I was at the basic school, going back to, we started in September of 97. My mother passed away in October of 97. That was hard. We got through that, finished the course, and came out different, ready to go. And we kind of went from there. And then upon completion of that course, literally went right across the street to the infantry officers course there at Mitchell Hall, where I had the opportunity to learn from some really great Marine officers, some more really great mentors, some of which are still on active service today. And I'm just thankful for everything I got from them, quite frankly.
How do you think your enlisted time influenced your early days as an officer?
I would tell you that it entirely influenced my understanding. I would tell you that when I joined the Marine Corps, I did it out of, I wanted to be a Marine. That was the reason that I did that. And I had seen officers obviously going through military school, but at the end of the day, I did not fully appreciate as a cadet going through military school the role that the officer played. I did not fully appreciate, sure, I might have been a cadet officer, and I was, but serving time in the ranks as a young Marine definitely opened my eyes to what would be expected of me as an officer. And the one thing that I never forgot, we talk about that balance between the mission and the men or the Marines, right? Sure, you need one to get the other done, and the other is the most important. The mission is always going to come first, and the Marines are going to be the ones that do that mission. But it really got me to understand skin in the game. It really got me to understand, what that position of authority and responsibility truly meant, what the commission itself really meant. And at the end of the day, when I was commissioned, I'll never forget being commissioned at Villanova. What I will never forget about that experience is we had a Marine Corps legend, that being General Zinni, who was class of 65 from Villanova, as our commissioning officer. He was a 3-star at the time, and he came out and, he reminded us that the bars that we were getting ready to wear were not for us, but they were for the Marine. So, that was always something that stuck with me was, the reason that you've spent this time at school, the reason that you've done all this training was to get you ready for that eventuality. So that was really the whole reason behind it.
And so in your time at Villanova, did you go through, like, I'm familiar with more Army terminology, like green to gold, ROTC?
I went through
pathway.
Officer Candidate School.
Officer Candidate School.
Yeah,
Okay.
so in the Marine Corps, we have the program of Platoon Leaders Course. All roads, with the exception of the Naval Academy, all roads will find you to the Officer Candidate School.
Okay.
There are many different ways to do it. The ECP, the MCP. The course that I went through in my time was the what they call PLC, or Platoon Leaders Course. I did 2 6-week summers. I did one in between my freshman and sophomore year of school, and then I did my second between my junior and senior year. They no longer do it this way. Back then, it was you did it what they called the junior course, and then you did the senior course. Now they only do one 10-week course, and that's it. But I also did participate in the NROTC program there at Villanova as a midshipman. Some of my classmates are still out there doing some pretty great things, and they're senior colonels and captains in the Navy, and I'm sure some of them will probably be flag officers because they're that good.
Was that kind of an interesting experience to be, a part of, I guess, Navy ROTC? What was that like, seeing the crossover between Navy and Marines in that ROTC program?
It's funny because I don't think if I didn't have that experience, but yet I had lived through the 26 years of my career, I would tell you that I would not have learned anything about the Navy in my time. When I sat down and I took a look at my DD-214, for example, I've spent only 6 months out of 26 years with the United States Navy aboard ship. And that's largely predicated on our experiences, the global war on terror, where, I spent all my time ashore. And again, the benefit of having done Naval ROTC at that time in my life was to get to understand not only the terminology, but also the traditions of the Navy. The Marine Corps is obviously part of the Department of the Navy. We interpret regulations probably certainly much stricter than our counterparts on the blue side. That's what we're known for. That's part of the lure, if you will, of the Corps. But that's why we joined the Marine Corps, because we want that discipline and we want that to be hard. Otherwise, we wouldn't do it.
Well, I want to look ahead a little bit at so your early years in the late 90s and early 2000s as an infantry officer in the Marine Corps. Can you tell me a little bit about duty stations you served at, as well as some of the overseas deployments?
So initially, when I was first made an infantry officer, I was assigned to Camp Lejeune, North Carolina. My first battalion I went to was 2nd Light Armored Reconnaissance Battalion as a platoon commander. I checked into Bravo Company, 2nd LAR, where I spent time as what we call a guns platoon commander, or a line platoon commander. After a certain amount of time with 1st Platoon Company B, I found myself the weapons platoon commander as a more senior lieutenant. At that time, I went from being a 2nd lieutenant to a 1st lieutenant. After I had spent some more time in that position, probably about 6 to 8 months, became a company executive officer for one of our companies, our H&S company there at 2nd LAR Battalion. And then for a very short period of time, after one captain had rotated out and another one was getting ready to rotate in, I served as the company commander for H&S for a short period of time, at which time I was getting ready to pin on captain myself. Came up on orders. I was getting toward the end of my first tour there as a lieutenant, as captain, and ended up taking a set of orders for a year to go to Saudi Arabia. Actually ended up going to Saudi Arabia for a year and then being an advisor to the Saudi Army National Guard, not to be confused with the way in which we do, our National Guard here. Their National Guard protects the borders of the entirety of the kingdom. They are responsible for the safety and security of the royal family. And went out there and took year-long orders, working out of the greater Riyadh area. I was there when when the USS Cole was blown up in Yemen, down there in the Gulf, down there in Gulf of Aden, I guess that would be. And then I came back to the United States in August of 2001, 1 month before the Twin Towers were hit.
Wow.
During the time that I was in Saudi Arabia, the second Antifada was taking place in Israel. This is about the time that Yasser Arafat was getting his house pulled down, bulldozed over and so forth. Spent the majority of my time while we were out in Saudi Arabia in what they call Threat Con D, which is our most restrictive force protection measure. I was, at that time in my life, I'd been through a lot of specialized training to get ready for that deployment. And, we had done a lot of, specialized things to get ready to be immersed really not only in the Arab culture, but to, work alongside Arabs and to get to understand them. I did not have an opportunity to go to what we call DLI, or the Defense Language Institute for Arabic. I was considered a hot fill, so needs of the service took, priority over my personal needs of getting to learn the language. So I ended up learning it whilst in country. And it really was a tremendous opportunity. I got to really watch the shift, if you will, in the Arab world, uh, kind of juxtapose that to global politics of what was going on at that time. While I was deployed, I can remember the whole hanging Chad debate of the 2000 election. That was part of, it was a lot harder to get a hold of a TV feed at that time. It was a little bit different back then. Cell phones yet weren't really a thing. So communication back to the United States at the personal level was a lot different back then. But that was definitely a very maturing experience for me to, do that as an advisor, which was my job. I was a military advisor to a battalion in the in First Brigade of the Al Harz Wadani, is what it's called in Arabic, of the Saudi um, National Guard there. And upon completion of that tour, I returned back to the United States. The job that I was getting ready to take, I was actually on leave at the time when the Twin Towers were hit in New York and the Pentagon was hit. My father had retired from the New York Phone Company back in the 1980s, but had still been at that time working for Verizon. Um, we have a lot of family. My uncle was a New York City police officer, retired shortly thereafter that, worked there at the academy. But we grew up with a lot of folks that were civil servants, both not only firefighters and, policemen. My grandfather, my dad's father, had been a police officer. Um, my aunt's husband, he had been a police officer, and then my dad's brother had been a police officer. So 9/11 for me was a very, very personal attack.
Hmm.
Um, growing up with it, knew a lot of people, had been in that area, in Manhattan and so forth. And, coming back on leave, after being gone for a year, I guess they took pity on me and gave me about 2 to 3 weeks of leave. And it was during that time that, I had received a phone call on the landline there at the house saying, "Hey, are you watching the TV right now?" I said, "No, man, I just got back from a run. What are you talking about?" Click. Wow. It just got real, real fast.
Yeah.
And I'll never forget, I sat down, that happened, and I was scheduled, I guess you would say at that point, to get married about a month after that. My first marriage was back in 5 October of 2001. So no less than 2 to 3 weeks after this event,
Wow.
that happened. And I'll never forget, I sat down probably latter part of the afternoon on the 11th of September, maybe the morning of the 12th. I don't really remember. But I remember sitting down and writing, just my thoughts about it at that time, and unfortunately, I was absolutely right about what I wrote, which was, in fact, what we have got ourselves into with this is going to be something that's going to be a lifelong problem that I'm going to continue to see, because this is just not going to end. This war will never find an end. This is just the beginning. And, in relation to historical events, it was probably two of three, because there had been an attack at the center. Before that, you had terrorist operations that were taking place around the world. And I got to learn a lot about that. Obviously being in the kingdom, bin Laden was a Saudi citizen. So I learned a lot about that. So really for the next 2.5 years, I had a tremendous opportunity to train young officers. As a young captain, I now had the opportunity to give back to a group of folks that really needed it. It became, what the events of September 11th really focused me toward, this thing just got real. So I need to get folks ready for, at that time of my life, I had not yet been to combat myself. So, there's a certain amount of, I got to do a lot of reading in order to really understand what I'm getting folks ready for. I grew up in the Marine Corps. As an enlisted Marine, I was very fortunate. I had served with senior officers, as well as senior staff non-commissioned officers who were Vietnam Marines. And, those Vietnam veterans, taught me a tremendous amount about, from their experience, what the essence of combat was going to be like, above and beyond all of the killing and fear and, just trying to find a way really, to teach somebody that has no context of what those things are. That was kind of the first time that I had seen it. But now I was being tasked with, my responsibility was to get these folks ready to go. It totally changed, what it was that I was doing. The men and women that I trained, I trained 2 platoons. I did 10 months first as a general instructor in warfighting, and go figure, the subject that I got to cover was anti-terrorism force protection, because I was the guy that was just fresh back from doing all that stuff. I'd like to tell you that, there probably wasn't anybody sleeping during that class, because that was a pretty daggone important class. And, they really gravitated to that. And then I did 2 platoons as a staff platoon commander myself. We talked about old Captain Dodd, Forrest Dane Dodd, who had been my staff platoon commander during the time that I went through as a student. Really became a model for me, as I was getting ready to teach these young folks on how to not only develop the required officership, but certainly the skills that they needed to survive in that environment. I trained 2 platoons of 35 Marine officers each. Many of them have gone on to command at the lieutenant colonel and colonel level. I'm very proud of the folks that I developed from those 2 platoons, many of which are still on active duty at the 06 level now. They're running around as full colonels, which I think is great because they went further than I did.
That's awesome. I'm curious, you're talking about these very important topics at this point in time. To what extent do you feel like, it's not like you plan for world historical events to turn out the way that they do. And so to what extent do you feel like, teaching that kind of stuff on the ground, and it's gonna be real, how much knowledge is there that you've got to work with, and how much are you like, I'm imagining lessons learned over the next 20 years, like.
Right. So very recently here, I just got done speaking with our sports teams here aboard UWF. And a lesson that I've always used and I continue to use to this day is the differences between training and education. The way that I talk about it and have talked about it for many years is that training is doing those things that are going to prepare you for tasks of the known.
Mhm.
For example, you know that if you stand on this part of the court, you shoot the basketball at this edge of the box, you've got a 99% chance of probably putting it in the basket. You're going to run these drills. You're going to do this. You're going to prepare yourself. And the mantra that I use is morally, mentally, and physically. I tell my Marines years ago a couple things. Number one, that nobody really cares about how smart you are. It's a question of what you can teach others. The second part of that is you have to be morally grounded, you have to be mentally ready, and you have to be physically fit.
Mm.
Now, the mentally ready piece is really to your question of none of us have any idea what's going to, destiny is going to come and tap you on the shoulder. Okay. So the education side of it was simply preparing you for those things that you did not yet know were going to happen. All of the reading, all of the experiences that you've had, culminating at a point when time and space decide to come along and offer you this risk opportunity challenge that you have no idea that you were going to get. So giving people that grounding of being morally grounded, giving them the opportunity to be mentally ready and physically fit and preparing them for the challenges of what they were going to get themselves into is, that's a lesson that I've taught not only to Marines, but I've taught to students for years, because at the end of the day, that is the sum total. You will rise or fail under the weight of those challenges if you choose to. It's all up to you on what you're going to do with what it is that you've been given and how it's been presented. And that's really been a lot of the lesson that I've learned over the course of years about how to train and how to educate folks. And I found that that's been very, very effective.
That's great. Yeah. And then you deployed to both Iraq and Afghanistan, as well as Haiti,
Yes.
shortly after this period that we've been talking about. Can you?
So it started out in 2004. That was my first trip to Haiti. Some funny asides that I'll throw in there while I'm talking about it. I literally made it back from Haiti and a trip that I was on, and I made my first child's birth by 10 minutes, literally. Wow. She's fixing to be delivered, and I literally am coming down 40 in North Carolina. I freely admit that had I ever been caught, a state trooper would not have been very happy with me for how fast I was going. But I will also tell you that at the end of the day, I made it, and I got there with 10 minutes to spare. So, that was after my first trip. We deployed to Port-au-Prince, Haiti. Down in Port-au-Prince, we were providing security and stability operations down there in Port-au-Prince with Operation Secure Tomorrow. I graduated school from Advanced Armor in, I want to say it was April or May of 2004. Immediately following that, I checked into my battalion. I was being assigned as the Assistant Operations Officer for 3rd Battalion, 8th Marine Regiment. We checked in, myself and 3 other officers flew in. We checked into our battalion. My battalion commander at that time was a newly promoted colonel by the name of David Berger, who would go eventually. He was our last commandant of the Marine Corps before General Smith is now currently. He would be my battalion commander as a newly minted colonel, and we would see him again. I was assigned to 8th Marine Regiment. Our regimental commander was Charles Mark Gaines. And I would serve again under General Gerganis when we would go to Fallujah, Iraq in 2004-5. Coming back from Haiti, I had a very quick turn. We were getting ready, like I said, to go to Fallujah. The Battle of Fallujah began, the second battle, I should say, El Fallujah as it's called now. The second Battle of Fallujah was raging in November of 2004. One of our sister battalions, 1st Battalion, 8th Marines, was out there for the fight in the city. We came in on the tail end of that. I loaded up at the end of 2004. with the advance party from my battalion to go over to conduct a relief in place with 1st Battalion, 8th Marines, to clean up the city of Fallujah after the battle was over. We ended up occupying battle space between the Cloverleaf and Fallujah and Nasser Wassalam, or the Abu Ghraib prison, from west to east, and then from north to south as far as the RSA, or the Regimental Security Area, in the Lake Tartar area, all the way down to Mobile or Route Mobile in the south, right above Zidon. And that would be what we would call home for, the next 9 months. I think, we started operating there in January of 5, and we continued to operate there all the way through about September, maybe early October of 5. I think I was home in September, middle September, because I remember it was shortly after my daughter's first birthday by the time I made it home. And then we had a very quick turn to get ready for our next deployment. You're home, but you're out training. You're going to California, you're going to ITX, you're going all over the place to get ready. At this point, I had switched jobs. During the time that we were in Fallujah, I was the assistant operations officer still for the battalion, as well as the ISF advisor, working with the Iraqi security forces, because we didn't have anybody else that could, speak Arabic or had been partnered with Arab forces. Obviously, I had a year of it over in Saudi Arabia before. And then later on, getting ready for this deployment, I ended up picking up the H&S Company commander's billet while in Fallujah as well, toward the end of the deployment. And this is a very important story. I think I'm going to just tell you all real quick, is what I did learn. I remember being in Saudi Arabia in 2001, and this didn't really make sense until after I was done my second tour, or maybe even my third. Back in Saudi Arabia in 2001, it had been 10 years since we had done, Operations Desert Shield and Storm. And I remember asking my Saudi counterpart, who is a full colonel, and he actually pinned on a star while we were there and became a brigadier. And I asked him, I said, Saidi, which is the word for sir in Arabic, what do you think about Saddam Hussein to the north? Because he was still a thing at that time. And he looked at me and he said, Mustashar, which is the word for advisor. He's a very bad man, but at least I know who he is. And that would become poetic to me, once I started being involved in the insurgency operations that we were doing, particularly in a city like Ramadi, Iraq, which we'll talk about that experience separately here in a moment. But it became very clear to me what it is that he meant after being involved in combat operations in Ramadi in 2006 and beyond. We came in and we assumed battle space in Ramadi, Iraq. We came in early March. By March 16th of 2006, I had assumed battle space from Kilo Company, 3rd Battalion, 7th Marines. A very good friend of mine and peer, Phil Ash, was the commander of that organization. He and I had served together at 2nd LAR as lieutenants back at Camp Lejeune. I'm ever grateful for what Phil left for us and what he did for us while we're out there. And I tell him that all the time. One of the most professional turnovers I've probably ever done with an organization, between two organizations. And we got out there and, Phil spent a lot of time just training us and teaching us about the realities. We had read about him. We had seen him on the news and so forth. But we really got out to Ramadi and got a very quick understanding of the nature of the place that we were working, a tremendously violent environment. We used to say that if somebody wasn't shooting in you, shooting at you, or something was going on in Ramadi, you would feel like there was something wrong. And there was a lot of truth in that statement. Ramadi itself, in the 2004 to about the latter part of 2006, could be argued was the most violent place on earth. It was certainly the most dangerous. I know that you gentlemen had an opportunity last night to see our ceremony where we were presenting our Gold Star scholarships. You had seen Corporal Spears um, serving with India Company I, 3rd Battalion, 7th Marines, as a local man here who was killed in Ramadi, a tour before I served out there. Um, Ramadi was the kind of place. Um, that's really where the heart of the insurgency was. That's where AQI was. That's where AQI decided to fight American forces in Western Anbar after Fallujah. That's really where it took place. It would be during this time um, that you really had an opportunity not only to understand what combat was all about, but finding the resiliency and finding the ways to really get yourself through that experience. I would tell you that it was probably amongst the most horrible experiences that I probably ever had. I will tell you that I grew tremendously as a result of those experiences. Certainly the camaraderie, and certainly um, the feelings that I had that prior to, during, and after have never left me. 20 years later, and it's crazy to say that, but next year it'll be 20 years since I served in there. And I was a very senior captain at that time. A year later, I would become a major. So I was much more mature in my understanding. And I would be frank to tell you that, there are times that, I was pretty positive that I was 30, not going to see 31. I was pretty sure I was sure of myself. Um, yes, I'd been hit by a couple IEDs on my first deployment to Fallujah. And certainly, as the war evolved, the tactics, techniques, and procedures on both sides did as well. By the time that we got to Ramadi, the threat level was not only more, better, and different, it was just more, better, and different. There was a lot of it. And thinking back on it now, the lessons that I took away from the city of Ramadi, definitely impacted the way that I would look at the world for the 20 years that I've had since. Um, it is not an experience that will ever leave me. I'll just say it that way. Um, I know that, you wanted to talk about, what the experience of being wounded was like. I will tell you that my entire version of the world would change at 0703 on the 2nd of April, 2006. The background behind that was I was doing supporting, I would say, a vehicle mounted patrol with my 3rd platoon as a company commander. I would take my truck and throw it into their patrol. There was 5 vehicles. We were doing a security presence patrol, getting out there and spending some time, getting to understand the city. We had only been on the ground at that point about maybe 3 weeks. As most folks would tell you that have combat experience, it's the 30 days on the front end and the 30 days on the back end are the most dangerous. You don't know what you're doing on the first 30, and you can't wait to get home on the second 30. And we were in that first 30 where we were still learning, getting out there, navigating the streets with our Humvees. We ended up finding ourselves up at the top of a place called Give Me and Racetrack, which were 2 intersections of roads toward the northwest or northeast rather of the city. At that point, the enemy had an IED that was planted up underneath of a manhole cover. The composition of that IED was probably somewhere between 2 to 3 152 rounds, artillery rounds, and 2 anti-tank mines that were placed underneath of a manhole cover. And the street was set up in such a way where there was a median right there. That is where the battery device would have been located. and it was also obstructing the wires that were going into the IED. Uh, all of our vehicles drove over that spot. The enemy initiated the attack, which turned out to be a complex attack, um, using a base, a base from a cordless phone that we used to have back in the early to late '90s. And basically, it was they would ring the phone back to the base station, and that's what was used to initiate the IED. That IED caught my last vehicle, which was Staff Sergeant McIntosh's vehicle, Eric McIntosh. Him, as well as Corporal Procopio, who was the gunner aboard that vehicle, and then Lance Corporal Kim, who was the driver for that vehicle, and our corpsman for that platoon, Doc Padilla, were all killed instantly. And the fifth man that was aboard that vehicle was a young Marine named Lance Corporal McKnight. Lance Corporal McKnight somehow survived that explosion, and it turned that vehicle inside out. It blew the engine block of that vehicle 30 meters away. It totally eviscerated the vehicle. And it, turned into a tremendous gunfight. We took a lot of fire from the west during that period. In the chaos that followed, I'll tell you, the most lonely time that I've ever had my entire life was the time that was spent waiting, because at this point there were some decisions that were getting ready to be made here. The first was, Lance Corporal McKnight was still alive, and we had to get him out of there as quickly as possible. Otherwise, he was not going to live. I can distinctly remember talking to my third platoon commander, Lieutenant Wilson. I said, "You need to get him back. You're going to take your vehicles and you're going to move out, and you're going to get him back to Charlie Surge back at Camp Ramadi rather. And I got this. I'm going to stay here, and we're going to do what we're going to do up here." So he took McKnight and he moved out. They rolled back to Charlie Surge, and thank God he lived. And for the next 15 minutes, which could have been 15 hours or 15 days in one's mind, I remained on station, controlling aircraft overhead and taking a lot of fire with my vehicle, maneuvering back and forth to evade RPGs and other things, where I stayed with my crew. And we secured that area because I still had my KIAs were still on the ground. And I had located Staff Sergeant McIntosh first, followed by Corporal Procopio and Doc Padilla. But I did not have the ability to find Lance Corporal Kim immediately. And I was waiting for battalion to send me the quick reaction force so that we could further secure the scene. And it was the longest 15 minutes of my life while we were taking fire. It would be during this time that I would end up taking bullet fragmentation through my hand and my arm on my right side. And that would be, the event not only that would lead to my wounding, but, a reconciliation that would start my life that probably hasn't ended yet. And I would tell you that, I remember Corporal Hunt, who was my vehicle commander at the time, saying to me, hey, sir, you got blood all over you. I'm like, Hunt, look around. There's blood everywhere. No, sir, that's yours. It's coming out of your hand. Oh, yeah, right. And, in this particular instance, the bullet fragmentation had gone through the knuckle of my trigger finger. Afterwards, I had noticed when I flipped my M4 up and I looked down on the forward assist of my weapon, there was a piece of brass, copper jacket, if you will, that had gone right through my finger into the bottom of the forward assist of the weapon. So between that and, I had also burned my hands, both of them, during that incident, dealing with taking care of the scene there that we had. I had to get one of my Marines that was physically in the fire, out of the fire, um, because I just thought that was the right thing to do. There's a lot more detail that I can go into with that, but I will not.
Do you think that was just adrenaline? You just didn't feel the injury?
I did not. I absolutely did not. I had burned my hands before I was hit, so I didn't really think about it. And then once we got into the firefight itself, the enemy was putting a lot down on us. From what I can tell, I was hit by a medium machine gun. The fragmentation from the bullets hitting the ground was what went through my hands and my arm. Some of it went into my flak jacket as well. I was very fortunate that I was wearing the ESAPI plates at that time of my life, and not the first ones that we wore to Fallujah. Once the QRF arrived, the QRF was being led by a Marine by the name of Staff Sergeant Winship. Winship had been with me together on our first deployment to Fallujah. He had worked for me as my assistant operations chief, a very sharp young man. He was first on the scene, and it would be his Marines that finally had answered the question for me of what had happened to Lance Corporal Kim. When the vehicle exploded, his body was actually thrown on top of a building about 50 meters away from where the actual IED had gone off. So, as a leader, we teach that accountability piece for our personnel, weapons, optics, and crypto, and so forth. I will tell you that was absolutely the worst feeling I've ever had in my entire life, of not knowing where one of my men was physically. And, I will never forget Staff Sergeant Winship coming back to me saying, "Hey, sir, I finally found Kim." It was like, being hit and all of the other things that had happened to me paled in comparison to the relief of knowing what had finally happened to him. It's not the outcome that I wanted, but certainly at least knowing that I was being able to provide that closure, not only for his family, but for myself and our company and everybody else, it was a tremendous relief, even in those circumstances. So, we finally, I'll never forget my battalion commander for that deployment, as well as for our Fallujah deployment, Lieutenant Colonel Neary, later on Major General Neary. He had come up to the scene, and the first words out of his mouth were, "Hey, Del, what can I do for you?" I said, "Sir, I just need help getting this taken care of. We got to get all this cleaned up. We're not leaving any of this on the objective for the enemy. Nothing of it." And we spent the rest of the day getting shot at, just doing what we could to clean all that up. I finally made it back, sometime thereafter to, to Hurricane Point. Doc, my company corpsman at that time was HM2 Henry Gonzalez. He ended up treating my wounds between him and Lieutenant Commander Hollis would end up treating my wounds, patching me up. Probably wore a bandage on my hand for about the next 30 days, my arm, so forth. But the next major thing that had to happen that day was that our KIAs had to go home. So we were waiting for the Fallen Angel flight coming out of Camp Ramadi. And I'll never forget, I was in the process of getting my wounds dealt with when one of my senior staff non-commissioned officers came in and said, "Sir, they're getting ready to move our guys." I told Doc he had to wait. I just said, "Doc, we gotta go." And that was the last time until Staff Sergeant McIntosh made it to Section 60 in Arlington. There with many of the folks that Marines, soldiers, sailors, and airmen, and so forth, that were killed in action during our wars. When I go to 60, I could tell you that I walk those rows and, I know this one and I know that one. I serve with this one. I trained that one. Lot of very, very good friends there. Just in the Marine Corps side, Captain John Maloney. We served together at the basic school as instructors. Jamie Edge, they were in the same battalion. Both of them are captains. Jamie and I had served together at 2nd LAR with Phil Ash, Twain Hickman, and a bunch of other guys. We were all together. He's buried there at 60. Of course, Megan McClung, who would also be killed in Ramadi. She would be the first Naval Academy graduate to be killed in action. Female Naval Academy graduate. She was killed in Ramadi. She's buried there. There's a young man there by the name of Lieutenant Stern, who had been one of my students at the basic school, went through a different platoon, not mine, but we went to armor school together at Fort Knox. He's buried there. Gunnery Sergeant Ball, from my first deployment to Fallujah, he was the India Company Gunnery Sergeant. He's buried there. Staff Sergeant McIntosh is not far from him, right there on the edge of 60. And, there are many others. There's a young man buried there who was with the very first company that I trained when I was in warfighting at the basic school, Lieutenant Picorni. He is buried there. There is a building now at Quantico that is now one of the new barracks for the officers that are going through the basic school. Their hall is named for him, and he is buried there, and many, many others.
Do you have any thought on how you personally, I mean, you go to Arlington physically. How do you honor, these friends, these people? How do you keep them in mind and keep their memory alive?
I like to tell folks that, for us that have been out there doing it, Memorial Day is every single day to me. It really is. I have taken my children when they were young, all the way through my ability to take them when they were older. But it was one of those things that when they were very young, I would take my children there and, I would make them promise me that even after I'm gone, that, they're going to continue to come and honor these guys. There is no way really to effectively quantify how heavy of an experience that is. It was always my wish, and it probably will always be my wish that when I eventually do pass, that I want to be there with them. It really is, it is when you think of America and you think of the American flag, that red is Arlington. It certainly is. I have many members of my family are buried there. I talked about my Uncle George earlier. Uncle Lefty, as we called him, he is buried there. My grandmother's father is buried there. There's obviously I have a lot of friends that are buried there. And I don't really know, how to truly, it is very difficult, I should say, for me to explain what Arlington really means. I mean, it is, it's not just the pomp and circumstance of seeing Nathan and I out there or, the U.S. Army's 3rd Infantry out there. It's so much more than that. It is a testament, really, I would think, to the character and the soul of this country, knowing full well how Arlington was first formed, as the property of Robert E. Lee, where Union soldiers were first buried during the Civil War. But in all of the wars and conflicts since, everything from going to see the Tomb of the Unknown Soldier, all the way to the rows upon rows upon rows of crosses and stars and so forth. It is truly, I would say, probably the most sacred ground in America, easily. I mean, it's been bought with blood and lives beyond any one person's ability to really reconcile. I think many Americans, I think most folks probably don't think about that. But I will tell you, as somebody who has been touched by it, I tell you that there isn't a day that goes by that I don't think about it.
Mm. Wow. Something that has struck me during our conversation, and this leads into something we were talking about before we sat down for this interview. But something that struck me throughout this conversation is the way that you historicize your experiences. You mentioned uh, just several times throughout this interview, you talked about historical events and the surrounding historical context. You talked about being in Saudi Arabia and learning the language, and you talked about uh, 9/11 as a major historical event. It's just something that struck me. Of course, you studied history at Villanova, and you studied, um, history at the graduate level, and earned your PhD in history as well. And you mentioned earlier when we were talking about your experience in Ramadi that your graduate study was kind of uh, a result of that.
Mm-hmm.
And I wonder if you can talk about that, but then also maybe about your relationship with history.
Okay. Well, I would tell you, as a graduate professor now, and this is something that I've taught for many years now, is getting people to understand the differences between the past and what is history.
Mm.
It's quite simple, and I would tell you that the past is actually what happened, whereas history is the interpretation of it. And I always believed, even growing up from a very young age, my command of historical subject was always quite good. Always was. And it's not, history is not all about, places and names and things. It's about thinking and feeling as well. It's about ideas, and it's about the exchange, of different things, whether it's in terms of conflict or anything else that form events and outcomes in our world. And, I'm not a believer in the trite phrase that, for those that don't read history, it repeats itself. I'm not a believer in that. I do believe, however, that, the geographic bounds that we have on the seas and on the ground and everything else continue to form the same events over and over.
Mm.
Because, in the grand scheme of things, we're talking about war right now. War in of itself is a social phenomenon, and that's the way that we talk about it. I am a Clausewitzian in my understanding of what is war. I've taught Clausewitz. I believe it. The funny thing about Clausewitz, particularly when in the military, is that it's often quoted, but very often not understood.
Mm.
If you sit down and you really read it, it'll speak to you in a way that if you've had those experiences, I'd read through it and I'd say, wow, yeah, that dude knows what he's talking about. Yep. Yeah, he's got it. That's absolutely true. Yep. Uh-huh. Another book that I love reading in that context, the author of Matterhorn, or Carl Melentes, had written a book called What It's Like to Go to War. And he was a Marine officer as well in the Vietnam War. And every time I wish I could get a hold of him to tell him this, because every single time I have read that work after a deployment, I've come back and I read, yep, yep, yep. 'Cause it's all true. Because it's irrespective of time. The experience of what it's like to go to war is immutable. It really is. Because at the end of the day, the essence of what it is that we do on the battlefield is finding ways to overcome the absolute horror and shock and the fear and all the other things that go into making war what it is. The uncertainty, that horrible, dirty, nasty, terrible place that you are, where, there is no such thing as somebody who's not afraid. They might be able to hide it really well, but you're going to be terrified.
Mm.
But you're in a position of leadership, so therefore you have got to find a way for you to get through it. And that'll get you through it. Now, to your question of what happens on the backside of it. Wow. When I got done Ramadi, in 2006. I think I finally made it home. I want to say it was October by the time I got home, maybe September, end of September. I now had the challenge of trying to conceptualize and contextualize the experiences by which I had just had. And they were not normal experiences by any stretch of the imagination. You know, as I'm trying to navigate the space of folks saying things like, thank you for your service, I'm thinking to myself, good God, man, I don't even know if you have an idea of what you're thanking me for. You have no idea what I've survived. You have no clue. You know, like I said, Ramadi was indeed the most dangerous place on earth at that time, bar none. And we, you know, when we finally did get home, I had to find a way to recover and find ways of resiliency to keep myself, you know, to keep going, really. An analogy that I like to use is that when you get wounded, you know, it's like falling off of a horse. It really is. You have got to find a way to get back on that thing. And never in my life have I ever felt so vulnerable as I did when I got wounded, because none of us believe it's going to happen to you. You just don't believe that. Right? And then when it does happen, you're like, wow. I'm not Superman. I'm not 10 foot tall and bulletproof, man. That's not what it is for me anymore, really. It's not. But now you have got to find a way as a man to overcome that vulnerability. You know, and sometimes you can get it from family. Sometimes folks, you know, have had those experiences or not. But as a man, you're afraid to ask questions like that because you don't, you know, in the military culture, you know, we don't want to portray that weakness. With, you know, when you're a leader, you know, we always say that you can't do that. And you believe that, you know, but in your own mind, you're asking yourself, is feeling this way or thinking about this stupid? Is this me overreacting, or what is this? I don't even know what to do with that. You know, it's all emotions too, which we're terrible at. And for me, what I found was I needed to go back and I needed to understand this phenomenon, you know, not only at the theoretic level, but also at the practical level, where other people have had these experiences over thousands of years. And, you know, the weight of these books upon bookshelves would tear down shelves, because there's heavy, there are tons of them. And, you know, you go back through those works looking for those nuggets that are in there that are going to give you some idea of what it is that you're getting yourself into, and trying to make this journey of recovery to get you back on the horse. And ultimately what I found was the only thing that was going to get me back on the horse was the horse. I had to get back out there and go deploy again. I had to go, man. I had to find a way to get healthy. You know, even if it meant, you know, hey doc, everything's good to go. Don't worry about it. You know, whatever. But that's what we did. And, you know, I found my way back out with a PDSS, with a Navy Riveron squadron in 2007 to go out and look at the problem that they were getting ready to have at Haditha Dam. I took it willingly. I was working at the School of Infantry at Camp Lejeune at the time. Colonel Miller, my boss, and Colonel Kirkley, his boss, were in favor of me going out there. And I had a very, very close relationship with Colonel Miller. And I said, sir, I just need to do this. You know, he'd been my XO in Fallujah a couple of years before that. And I just said, sir, I have got to go. I have got to go do this, because I'm not going to be right until I do it. And as a result of that, that gave me an opportunity. You know, I was going back to theater. I was going back to Iraq. It gave me the opportunity to get myself mentally straightened out a little bit, you know, but I needed that. I needed that for me. And then on the back side of that, I went to school. I went to the School of Advanced Warfighting, with some very, very highly, you know, thought of peers that I had from, you know, the rank of major. very good friends of mine all. And together there, we were, this is in 2009. We were fixing to make the transition really heavily from Iraq to Afghanistan at that time. And I had not yet been to Afghanistan. I'd done all my time in Haiti and Iraq. And that seemed to be the next challenge for me. We went to school for 11 months. We read 18,000 pages of history in the course of those 11 months. It comes out to about 600 pages a night, thereabouts. And it was the greatest experience of my life. I said the Marine Corps is going to pay me money to go to school and read things that I would have read anyway. Wow, that's awesome. So I had a chance to do that. And it would be on the tail end of that experience is, that constant reading, constant writing. I wrote a lot of articles for the Marine Corps Gazette and other magazines during that time. And really, what it gave me is that reading and writing was so cathartic to me at a different level. Otherwise, what would have happened had I not done that? I probably would have done, what I would have done anyway, which was probably drink my face off. It was certainly a much healthier outlet. Yeah, we're going to go PT. Yeah, we're going to go lift weights. Yeah, we're going to do this and that. But ultimately, at the end of the time, you're still somewhere where you are thinking about the men that you have lost, your own issues that you're going through as a result of that deployment. You're going through not only the loss of men, in battle, but, the minute you got home, all of your guys went to the winds. I remember turning my rifle company over after 15 months to a man that I had never met. It was like, and the Marine Corps is a very small place, particularly in the infantry, even though it's our largest thing, but everybody knows everybody is an officer. It's pretty common. But I didn't know this man. And I had nothing against him or anything like that. But I was like, dude, this is like me giving my children to somebody that I've never met. It felt really, really strange, but that's the way of things. I was very fortunate that I brought a lot of my men with me to go to the School of Infantry where I was working with Colonel Miller and Colonel Hobbs. And I said, man, this is all right. And then on the backside of going to school, really what it became is I needed to get back out there and go again. I found my way to Marine Forces Command in Norfolk, Virginia. And from there, I went to the Republic of Georgia on 2 separate occasions and ended up taking a Georgian infantry battalion, 12th Infantry Battalion. I deployed with them to Helmand. We ended up going to base, a forward operating base out there called Shikvani, right across the river from Sangin and right down up the hill from Doab. Working about a 25 by 17 piece of battle space out there for about 7 to 8 months. And it would be during that time that by the time I got to Afghanistan in 2012, I was 6 years past the experience of being wounded. I'd had 6 years of opportunity to really reflect and think about what had happened to me. And what it did for me as a leader, particularly in a combat environment, is it really made me think even harder about how I made decisions and what I was making decisions on in time and space. Um, and that pensive sitting down and thinking through things, not paralysis by analysis, certainly, but thinking about what it is that we were doing and really thinking through why we were doing it and how we were doing it became a lot more of a question that I wanted to ask myself.
Can you tell me a little bit about working with the Georgian military and Tbilisi?
Sure. My first exposure to Georgian Armed Forces, or the GAF, if you will, goes back to about 2010 when I first graduated from the School of Advanced Warfighting. I had the opportunity, I checked into Marine Forces Command as a newly minted planner, and there was a requirement for a Russian-speaking infantry officer to deploy to the Republic of Georgia. I said, well, I'd do that. And they're like, it's a good thing you do that because you're going. Right, okay. You're going to Tbilisi. Well, okay. So for the next 6 to 7 months, we were operating in Tbilisi, Georgia. I was there with a very small team of Marines, and we were responsible for getting a Georgian infantry battalion ready to deploy to um, Afghanistan. They were going to go, hold battle space in Helmand
Mm.
to assist American and ISAF forces in Afghanistan. I had done very, very little time with the Georgian forces to that point. I had taught for a few iterations at the Baltic Defense College in Tartu, Estonia. When I left, while I was actually at the School of Infantry, I'd gone TAD, TDY a couple times to go out there and teach various courses, and they had a couple Georgian students that were part of the course. I had worked with, Georgian civilians. I'd worked with Georgian military, so I began to acquire an understanding of, who they were and what they were about. Um, what I came to understand and respect about them was not only their sense of family, but their sense of cultural identity.
Mm.
I like to tell folks that, the Georgian way is, it's a very hard culture to penetrate. It is, you have to be accepted by that culture and brought into the culture by the people themselves. Otherwise, you're kind of an outsider until that happens. When you learn the language, you learn the customs, you read their works, the Chachavadze, you read, Ilya Chachavadze was one of the things that I liked to read when I was there. He was a writer at the end of the 19th century, early, he was very popular at that time. Um, but get to know the story of, the panther skin and Rustavelli, and you understood where they were coming from and the way in which they thought about things. Um, that is what made me a very effective advisor, because I genuinely wanted to understand the people that I was working with and really working for. This would find its way into 2012-13 when I would go back to Georgia, and then ultimately to lead, as a team leader, a unit that would be assigned to a Georgian battalion that holds battle space in Afghanistan. Um, Everything from the Georgians' cultural identity of being, strict Orthodox Christians, with their own patriarch. Um, our battalion chaplain, the Georgian chaplain, wore a black monk's robe with a flak jacket and a helmet with a pair of boots. That's what our chaplain looked like for the battalion, and it was quite normal to me. The Georgians, the very first thing that they built was not a chow hall aboard Shikvani. Indeed, it was a church. The very first thing. And, there was all the whether or not they were allowed to put up their religious icons and, put the cross up. They did. You weren't going to tell them no, they were going to do it. They were a very hardy people. I have the utmost respect for the Georgian soldier, and certainly many of the Georgian officers that I worked with are very dear friends. I'm still in contact with many of them. The sadness for a lot of those guys, as I look at it now, retrospectively, looking back 10, 15 years, is that, for many of the guys that fought with us in Afghanistan, fast forward from the experiences that they had in 2012 and 13 to the war, say, in the Ukraine. Georgia had been invaded in 2008 by the Russians, so there was a tremendous amount of hatred. And when the war in the Ukraine began in earnest in 2022 in February, it was not uncommon for a lot of folks that I had served with in the Georgian Armed Forces to find their way
Mm.
to fight the Russians again. Uh, Many of the Georgians, particularly that lived in the Gaudio area, those that were from South Ossetia and those from Abkhazia, had not forgotten the experience of 2008. And it's not just 2008, it's a struggle that goes back hundreds of years. It goes all the way past the Soviet period, back into the days of the Tsar. And to have the Georgians tell you the story, to be a part of the culture and to walk around and understand where it came from. I'd been to Gori. I went to the Stalin Museum there where I got to see what had happened in 2008, only about 2 years after. And, really got to understand the origins of the angst. But it's a tremendous country. I mean, for a country the size geographically of South Carolina, really, um, it is a tremendous group of people. Like I said, the officers that I served with, top-notch guys. Unfortunately, what I was getting to was when the war ended, many of them were removed from the armed forces. They're almost like men without countries now. Many of them live here in the United States.
Mm.
I've met some, I'm very good friends with my operations officer, for example, my former battalion commander, and many others are here simply because being at home for them right now is not good. So they found their way here. Um, but I couldn't say enough good about the time that I spent with those people. I certainly could not say enough, I couldn't say enough good about how good of a group of people they were. I had the utmost respect for them. They had challenges, no doubt. Every force does. But, just as a group of people, a very warm, very loving group that once you finally penetrate and understand the way the culture thinks about things, um, just a tremendous experience, really.
Hmm.
Very happy to have had it.
Yeah, thank you for that. And I wonder also, since part of that interaction was during operations in Afghanistan, if you could reflect just a little bit on, uh, I know your time in Afghanistan is very different for you in your career because this is much later in your career than your deployments to Iraq are. But I'm curious if you can kind of just reflect a little bit on the differences between serving in Iraq, serving in Afghanistan,
Hmm.
in terms of the strategic goals or
Yeah.
or just general on the ground experiences.
So by the time I got to Afghanistan, in a similar way to when I was wounded in Ramadi, I was at that time, I was getting ready to become a major. By the time I got to Afghanistan, I was nearly a lieutenant colonel. So 6, 7 years had passed. That was about how long it took between captain and major was 7 years. And I think it was about 7 years between major to lieutenant colonel. I served through Afghanistan. By the time I was getting near the end of my time is when I was notified that I had been selected for lieutenant colonel. And then I pinned it on in April of 14 after I came home. But to the question, Iraq and Afghanistan were two totally different wars.
Mm.
They were not in any way, shape, or form anything of the same conflict. Now, there were some similarities in that, the Islamic Republic of Iran was actually, facilitating, funding, and sending expertise, weapon systems into Iraq, which has become a very well-known fact, particularly in the Shia areas in Baghdad and others. Certainly, some of that found its way out west to where we were, and the Marines were in Western Anbar. But certainly, there was also expertise and other weapon systems that were finding their way to the Taliban in a similar way. That would be one connection. The other connection was, you know, Afghanistan felt like the origin of the war because after September 11th, that's where
Mhm.
Tora Bora happened and everything else went on out there. But in difference to the mobile war that Iraq largely was, like the historiography of it would be, the Huey helicopter was to the Vietnam generation what the Humvee was to my generation.
Mm.
And it was different by the time we got to Afghanistan. It was no longer the Humvee because you couldn't go anywhere because, where in Iraq, it would have been artillery shells on the side of the road. In Afghanistan, it was HME jugs and Hellman. that would have been put together that you would have gotten blown up with a 200 to a 500-pound charge by. It would blow it would blow a Humvee into orbit. So we were using Max Pros and Cougars and all kinds of heavier vehicles at that point. So that part of the war at the micro tactical, it also changed, but the opponent, the enemy, was totally different. Where in Iraq became the magnet for foreigners to come fight, for AQI. The Taliban didn't have to look far because those boys had been at war since the Soviets were there. And war in Afghanistan was so common and pervasive, it was like a soccer match. And when 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 there wasn't a foreign force for Afghans to shoot at, they were happy to do it with each other. And then when you showed up, they're happy to, get together and shoot at you. They were just a very, very different problem. It was just a very different environment. And where the Iraq security forces, we did not learn a very good job. We didn't do a very good job, I would say, of understanding that you cannot take, Shia soldiers out of Baghdad and bring them out west to deal with the Sunni population. That was almost as bad as putting me out there. Almost as bad. And then we did the same thing in Afghanistan, where we would take folks from, the northeastern provinces and bring them down to southwest to Helmand. They didn't even speak the same languages. What we had down here in Pashtun, these folks up here spoke Dari. They had no idea. And I'm over here trying to speak English and, whatever else I could to get some level of conversation and understanding, but there wasn't to be had. The problem that we had in Helmand with the poppy and the heroin problem down there in the south was tremendous. That's probably a conversation all into itself about what could have been learned there. But the whole idea of it being a narco war, the whole idea of the growing season turning into the fighting season, going back into the harvest season and so forth, that was real. It was very real. So to the question, it was just two totally different experiences. Afghanistan and Helmand was not nearly built up and did not have the infrastructure that, say, Fallujah, Ramadi, Baghdad, or any other city had. Iraq had oil, so they had a legitimate way to recover. Afghanistan had no such thing. They didn't have oil. They had heroin or the product to make heroin. So this is a lot different of a problem set.
I'd like to know a little bit more about that, what your experience with the poppy industry was.
So the best way to talk about it would be this. Talking to farmers and getting around out there in Helmand, we would ask them, well, why do you grow this? Because the Taliban tells us to. Tell you outright. Well, what happens if you don't harvest this and you decide to harvest corn instead? And they would tell us that if I do not, in fact, do what these people tell me to, they will come back here and take my family. They'll take my sons that I would need to harvest that corn, and they'll put them in the ranks and, they'll throw them as cannon fodder against you guys, and then I will lose my sons. And if I don't do this, they'll come back here and kill my wife or kill my children. So I get it. You're going to grow this because you're being told to. These people are going to come down here and harvest it. They're going to take it down to the Bom Char down south. They're going to trade it for weapons, for more AKs or what explosives or whatever. And then they're going to bring that stuff back and we're going to fight. That was the cycle of life out there. So you always knew, the growing season, you would see contact, the farmers didn't want you driving through their fields. They'd be happy to put, the Taliban put IEDs out in the field to keep you from driving through them, to keep you on the road. You did not you did not see a lot of contact from the enemy during the harvest season because all the folks would be out in the fields harvesting, so you wouldn't get a lot of contact then. But the minute that that stuff went south of the bomb char and came back, man, it was game on then. It was going to be game on. And the same could be said of like operating in Iraq, for example. Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, we're going to get it on all week. Friday would come along, they'd go to prayer, they'd go, to their religious services. You might be good on a Friday, but it wouldn't be operationally as bad. But come Saturday and Sunday, boom, we're back at it. We're getting after it again. So there was kind of a micro tactical schedule of events, and then in Afghanistan there was the growing seasons, and the harvest season really dictated when the fighting seasons were going to be.
That's so fascinating. That is daily life continuing, and affecting these strategies.
Oh yeah,
timetables of conflict.
in the meanwhile, people are still going to market. People are still going and doing what we would consider normal life things in what we also consider the combat environment.
Wow.
It was all going on.
Yeah. So after you got back from Afghanistan, you pinned lieutenant colonel, and so you're at this point you're working at pretty senior levels, and you went to the Pentagon.
I did.
I believe that.
I did.
Can you talk about that a little bit? That experience.
So I remember when I got my orders to go to the Pentagon, I was still sitting in Helmand. And I thought to the first thing that came to mind for me was the reward for good work is more work. Wow. So maybe I'm just better off staying here because at least I know what's going on here. I'd never served at that level. Didn't really understand it. And, wow. I thought to myself, going to the Pentagon, so I ended up finding a place in Fredericksburg, Virginia. Sight unseen, I rented it. I was like, I don't even know what I'm getting myself into, but I got to get there. So whatever. Took the train north every day. This is in 2013. And I found my way to the Pentagon for about a year. And then when the Ukraine crisis finally came out, I had spent a lot of time out that part of the world. I graduated with my PhD in 2012 in absentia. I was in Afghanistan when the graduation ceremony went. And I went to Germany for the service for a year. It started out as a 30-day deal, and the next thing I knew, I was out there for a year before it was over. Working some plans and some other things to respond to the aggression that we had seen in the Ukraine with the little green men and so forth. I had that experience, and then I came back and worked at the Command and Staff College for about a year, teaching students at the major level, those things that they would need, not only for command at the battalion commander level, but also those things that they needed to work at the 3 and the 4-star level as planners.
You retired in 2019,
Mm-hmm.
and you're a professor here at UWF, University of West Florida. Can you talk just a little bit about what you do here?
Okay,
how the Marine Corps affected that, or affected your career?
Yeah, so here at the university, I am the executive director for our Center for Leadership, the Elstock, Wick, and Creason Overholt Center for Leadership. Really what this is for me, it's a tremendous opportunity. I love to tell folks that this is a dream job for me because I have an opportunity to teach them something not only about themselves that they may not have recognized, but I'm going to be able to give them some tools and some ways to think about how to make decisions. So for me, it's really a dream job. I mean, it's an opportunity to help some folks out, that might not have gotten that experience some other way. Certainly they didn't need to go out and get it the way that I did. But it's just, we do a lot of different programs. Last night you had an opportunity to see our executive mentor program, where we're partnering folks, our student population with the, local CEOs, CFOs, and so forth. We do periodic leadership subjects here in November. We've got one coming up for leadership in the age of AI. This past May, we did veterans in leadership was a subject that we did. I ended up producing and giving the keynote address for that, largely talking about the effect of combat on a transitioning veteran and what that kind of looks like. That was an opportunity for me to talk a little bit about my experiences from Ramadi and a few other places. But we do those sorts of things. We are also tied in with our ROTC programs here. Obviously, they're in the business of training young officers, so we can help you with that. And we tie, directly in with our community partners out in town. Obviously, we have a tremendous military presence out here in the Panhandle. So, working with our Air Force counterparts down at Herbert and Eglin, as well as the folks that we've got here from the Navy aboard NAS Pensacola. So, my first real experience with NAS Pensacola, unfortunately, I retired on the 1st of September 2019. The 6th of December 2019, we had the terrorist attack aboard the base. And that was really the first time that I had the opportunity to kind of tell folks, the wars that I had fought in had finally come back home. This enemy that made this attack aboard this installation had been radicalized in the same way that I had seen so many that I had fought against. And for many people, that was an eye-opening experience, but it was not eye-opening to me. I was very, very familiar with that enemy, dating all the way back to 2001, to the time that I had spent in Saudi Arabia, seeing how that kind of ferment, how that kind of hate could be generated. And that's not to say that the Saudi people are hateful by any stretch of the imagination. That is not true. But certainly people that have been radicalized in that way, to hate Americans and to hate the West and to hate what it is that we stand for and the freedoms that we have. Certainly that would have been much more prevalent, but we did not. Many folks did not see that for what it was.
I know you have to go, so I will go ahead and wrap up. But if you could offer one piece of advice to young people
Mm-hmm.
who might be watching this, what would you say?
Couple things, really. Number one is be true to yourself. Do what it is that is your passion. Leading Marines was my passion. That's why I went the way that I did. Be committed to what it is that you're going to do. Give it your all, because somebody is going to be ultimately relying on you down the line. Study hard. I like to tell people that, you can pick your squad leaders, but your squad leaders don't get to pick their lieutenant. Okay, so if you don't do it right, guess what? There's 42 guys that are going to suffer as a result of you not knowing what you're doing. Put everything that you have into it. You never know what sort of impact you're going to have on folks, probably until much later in your years. But do yourself the favor of giving it everything that you've got, because you have a responsibility to do that. Put the needs of others before yourself. Never be afraid to do what it is that needs to be done to set the example. When it comes all down to it, never ask your folks to do something that you're unwilling or unable to do yourself. Never send somebody to do something that you're not going to do yourself. That's always been a guiding principle for me. And at the end of the day, be a person of moral character. Be somebody of moral character. Be mentally ready and be physically fit for the challenges that you don't know that are going to come, but you are responsible for other folks that you need to be prepared to do that. So that would be my thoughts about it.
Excellent. Is there anything in this interview that we've not covered that you'd like to add?
No, I think we ran through 50 years pretty quick.